April 2022 metagame, ladies and gentlemen. This is a post-Albaz structure deck where I think everything's gonna fall into place. I'm back. 30% of you guys are not smashed. Leave a crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so we can get to 100 and soon 5,000. So, tier list for what I think is kind of shaping up here. I love going through random tier list generator and finding these tier lists and using the cool ones because it gives me a chance to see what other people are thinking here. So, Agnister, truthfully, I think this deck should be tier 2. I think in terms of everything that this deck brings to the table, and, you know, looking at a lot of OCG results, obviously, like Max C, you know, not included, this deck should be, hypothetically, tier 2. But I think it falls more into, well, see, the definition of rogue here is like tier, like 0.5. I don't know. We'll put it here in tier 2 and we'll adjust from here. Based. Okay, so truthfully, Based is one of the better decks in the format. I've said that Based, Cyberse, Eldritch, and, you know, 10 Swords all kind of do the same premise of the same thing. The deck is definitely tier 1, that's for sure. Alright, if you don't think that this deck is tier 1, you're literally lying to yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Praying Kids, Brave. This is the best deck in the room. By far. Alright, I honestly, wholeheartedly think Praying Kids has exceeded all expectations at this point in time for the format. It has the highest representation in regional turnover, wins in first place, by the way, and the deck is just a consistent monster at this point in time. You know, it's not like it's an unbeatable matchup or anything, it's just that consistency is so far ahead of the rest of the format, and you've already started to see builds that are, you know, starting to explore, oh, I can play, you know, Small Worlds, I can play Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, I can play all of this toolbox stuff wrapped up into this deck, and I can have it succeed. And that's what really has put this deck so far ahead of the rest of the metagame that it's absolutely nuts. Like, I thought Based was ahead of its time, but Praying Kids just has evolved so far ahead of itself here that I think the deck is literally like Meow goes to 1, the deck falls apart, but that consistency is nothing to laugh at. Phantom Knights. So the deck isn't tier 2. The deck is not upper tier 1. I like to put Phantom Knights at like that tier 2 or tier 1.5 slot because the deck definitely has enough merit to carry itself along with the rest of the metagame, but it is definitely not better than these two. If you think that this deck is better than these, you are literally crazy. Like, so, yeah, kudos to this. Now, why are we putting Adventure Dragon Link here? Well, I think that, once again, the same kind of premise applies here. I think that this deck does not seem further ahead than these two in terms of play, but it is definitely ahead of this and way ahead of whatever's going on down here in the tier 2 bracket. Alright, so yes, I really do like this a lot. This is by far the best Dragon Link variant out there, and I'll bring regular Dragon Link up here. Okay, so Dragon Link, I would say, without the adventure package, is going to be your border between, it's like on the back end of things. It is not tier 2, but it is definitely up there. It definitely has a lot harder of a time with some of the meta. So we're gonna put this here. DDD. Alright, well, DDD is by far the definition of tier 2. The deck is good, which means, I don't know, I still think that Agnister, I guess we'll put Agnister down here because this still doesn't do anything. But DDD, you know, it's kind of taking a back seat here, but it also, DDD, you know, pretty much is the definition of rogue at this point in time. This deck does a lot, but it needs a good player and a lot of consistency. This deck, I think, might continue to fall down the tier list, though. Eldritch with 3 skill drains. Is it good? I would say it's on the level of DDD. Be perfectly honest with you, I think that this deck is really scary. But once again, it's going to take some level of competency here for this deck to maintain and do well in the format, at least with this build. So that's fine. Drytron. This is an interesting one. Drytron numbers have been dwindling a lot. But is Drytron better than Agnister? Yes. Is it better than Eldritch? Yes. Is it better than DDD? Yes. Do I put the deck in like the forerunner of tier 2? Yeah, I don't think the deck is like tier 1, but considering how the format has evolved, it's doing pretty well. Now, Eldritch or Cyberse Gadget deck. So this deck is falling off of popularity right now. This deck has had a little bit harder of a time here. I'm actually going to bump this down here into 1.5. Now, my problem with this is the deck is seeing less play, which means people are finding out more ways to kind of counteract it. But because it's not getting any regional turnovers really crazily here, I think it takes a lot of players to really, I guess, take skill to want to play this. The deck itself's power scale hasn't changed all that much, but I still pretty much put it here. It might be falling down into the lower end of things here. Actually, we'll put it here. I'll put it below the Dragon Link version. Even though I still put this and, the other variants in the same realm of things here, yeah, it's struggling. Evil Twins. I'm going to put Evil Twins at 2.5. This deck can still compete. Don't get me wrong. It can still do really well. But this deck has some struggle bus things to deal with here. Flunderies. Well, yeah, it's 1.5 for sure. This deck has been a consistent mainstay contender for a majority of the metagame, and I really like this. I think that this deck is very, very solid. I think that this deck keeps up relatively well with the meta, and the deck is definitely further ahead than everything in this categories, for sure. And for Noble Knights, we're just going to put this in Rogue. I wholeheartedly believe that this deck is good when it wants to be, but like these decks, it still needs a perfect good setup to do its job. Now here's an interesting one. Earthbox. Now I'm not going to put Earthbox at Rogue stats. I'm going to put it at the back end of tier 2 here. It and Eldritch both can get tops. It can do well. But it does not surpass the consistency of these decks, in my opinion, for sure. Invoked, I'm actually going to also put here in the tier 2 category as well. Invoked has not gotten a lot of top 8s, but it is pulling in top 16s very, very well. And I think that's actually a very important thing to note, is the consistency and turnover of these top 16s makes this deck actually a very scary competitor, honestly. Madolche. The Candy Treats. I'm actually going to put this in the same category as Evil Twin and this. But don't get me wrong. This deck can keep up with the stuff in this category. I just don't think that it's better than these. Does that make sense? I would say this is 2.5. Plunder. Now, this is an interesting one. So, Plunder, as of right now, is dependent on the rest of the format. Depending on how the format shapes up, ladies and gentlemen, depends on how Flunder itself does things. My thing is, this deck has had a lot of tops. Is the deck really better than the other versions in here? I really want to put this deck in tier 2. I truthfully do. I think that everything Flunder does is very dependent on, its matchups. But based on the results and what we're seeing right now in terms of turnover, I think 1.5... it's so weird. It's such a weird deck. It has to have a good player. It has to have competent matchups. But is the deck truly better than everything else in here? We're going to let it sit here for now. Virtual World. Oh, yeah. Virtual World we're going to put right here. This deck is very solid. I very much agree with this. Full-heartedly. This deck is very, 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 very powerful. Tenyi. Good stuff. Okay, so this is the Tenyi variant of Sword Soul. Literally, all of these decks are like your lower regional competitors here, and then you have the chunk of stuff up here. Regular Sword Soul I'm going to actually put in tier 2. This deck is on a struggle bus right now, actually. Like, this deck is... it's having a hard time keeping up. Like, I feel bad for this. Like, honestly... oh, I just realized this was the punk version. Oh, yeah, we're going to put that there, and then we're going to bring this version up here correctly. Alright, this version doesn't... I think this version keeps up about here in terms of the meta. Alright. Lyricalisk Tri-Brigade. I'm also going to put this deck in tier 2, but we're going to put it back here. This deck is keeping up with the meta. It's doing its job. Is it crazy powerful? Yeah, actually, I might... I'm going to put it here. I know that's a little bit rougher, but like this deck has got some issues. Regular Tri-Brigade, I'm also going to put back here. I'm going to put both of these side by side. I'm not saying that these decks are bad, but they take a good player. Dino Rars. Oh boy, this is by far like the definition of like tier 2 good stuff. I think that this deck, I've seen a lot of good anti-meta builds. I'd probably put it here in upper tier 2. Oh boy, Fallen of Albaz. Just kidding. We gotta talk about Striker. Oh boy, so I like to put Striker relatively high on the list because of the 3 variants. I think the Adventure package, the DP package, all of the versions of the deck are very good. Now, considering everything else that we've kind of fueled into tier 1 at this point in time, is there really anything up here that should be, like, obviously I think that this is the lead of the format here. I think this is like our next power level here, and then everything else kind of follows through with that. But all things really considered, you know, does this qualify as a power upgrade? And I don't think the answer is, I think the answer is this deck falls into about here. Now, I mean this, like, honestly, Striker, I think, does not surpass the stuff in 1.5. I think it drips into, like, the middle. I think the deck's got some very good consistent parts. You know, much like Plunder, it's dependent on the matchup, but that's just kind of what we're sitting at here. Now, Fallen of Albaz. Yes. Will this deck be truly tier 1, in my opinion? I'm actually going to put it in 1.5 here. I think the deck will probably come in mid 1.5. So here's my thing with this. Based on like the power scaling on this deck's going to want to see a ban list. Aluber and Friends are good. They are fantastic additions to the game. But if you're playing the pure variant, you know, where you're playing, you know, the Adventure package and this, the deck goes here. Now, you will see this build. You will see versions incorporate into Based. The engine is very splashable. But one thing you got to consider here, you know, for the build of this at this point in time, it will be a splashable thing. You will see decks taking advantage of it until Verte disappears out of the game. But for now, I'm going to safely put this here because I don't see a reason why I don't think it'll surpass what's up here, ladies and gentlemen. So I know 1.5 is full of things, but honestly, I don't think anything truly like surpasses this. Like, there's not a dang thing in here that is better than this in terms of consistency, in my opinion. So that is my tier list for April 2022. Please leave a comment down below what you guys think. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more Alice content. And I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.